Cloninger moves on in, and he scores! He's gonna learn today.
What's happening, everybody, and welcome to the second ever episode of the Pod Street Prospects, your midweek prospect update, coming live from the upstairs of my house.
In French, it's La Episode 2.
L'épisode 2. I'm Derek.
I'm John. What's going on, everybody?
Lest we forget to introduce ourselves here, but you already know who we are.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Go. You like that? Yeah,
that was like, if you would have just cut it after saying my name is Gove, that would have been beautiful.
I couldn't.
That's good though.
I've done that before.
I believe it. I mean, I'm sure you probably rehearsed it before we went on here, but folks.
Also, my Bon Jovi cover band joke. Have you ever heard that before?
John Bon Jovi.
Yeah, if I was being a Bon Jovi cover band, I'd call it Bon Jovi.
Definitely anyway, didn't see that coming. But
what are we here to talk about?
So what we've discussed here is for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about the prospects that are in the Flyers system. We're going to talk goalies today. So we've got a few that we're going to run through, and then the next couple of weeks, we're going to touch on defense and forwards. You're in for a treat this week, folks, because it shouldn't take too long to run through these goaltenders.
No.
You're right, and we are including the two that are down, or the one now that is down with Reading Royals. The other one, Sandstrom, just got called up to plug Lions Hole. But for now, we are going to start off with Mate Tomek.
First, before we go into the specifics, can I just talk about the goalies in general?
Yes, I think it'd be a good idea to give a sweeping generalization here.
You know, I think that the Flyers are in a really unique position because for so many years, goaltending has been such an issue. And now we seem to have the answer to all of our problems. And we have so many, I don't want to say great, but promising young goaltenders in the farm system. Some people will jump to the frame of thought like we don't even need them at this point, but with the way injuries have plagued this team, you just never know. So it's kind of nice to know that we have a lot of I don't want to keep using the word promising, but potential between the pipes.
There's some solid potential between the pipes for the Flyers farm system.
Right.
You've got guys like we're going to mention here, Tomek. I mean, the numbers, as you and I were talking about, are kind of deceiving. You're like, oh man, you look at how the beginning of his career went and how he just basically, when he was drafted out of the North American Hockey League, he played really well that year. And then went to North Dakota for 2 years, kind of, for lack of a better term, pooped the bed, played 2 total games. His numbers were terrible in those games, and then went to the USHL to play for Waterloo.
Yep. And then stunk for Nebraska Omaha.
Yeah, played terrible for Nebraska Omaha. 5 games, stats were terrible again. Then now he's over in Slovakia. And I mean, tell him his stats right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's unreal. In 18 games, he's got a 1.88 goals against average and a .938 save percentage. And when you looked at Tomek when he was drafted, he was kind of in that sweet spot for when you draft goalies that you're hoping turn into something. The third round is when he was drafted, but that second to third round is kind of when those higher end goalies get drafted because it's rare they get taken in the first. So there was a lot of promise behind this guy, a lot of expectations. He's playing well, really well, in Slovakia.
Yeah. Don't know exactly the level of competition in Slovakia. I'm sure it's still competitive, obviously, but...
Right. I mean, when you're one of the best goaltenders in any league, you deserve credit. But, I mean, the amount that this guy's bounced around.
Yeah.
He couldn't stick it for 2 college teams. The USHL, he played all right. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to gawk at. So, yeah, he's playing great. I still stick to what I said last season, where the Flyers really don't have anything in this guy. I don't think he's going to ever become anything within the Flyers organization.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the best thing to do with my friend Mr. Tomic?
Put him on the trade block.
Yep. Because all you need is one organization that hasn't done their homework to put some sort of value on this guy and package him. I mean, alone, he's going to get you maybe a 5th, 6th round draft pick. That's not going to help us. But if you could place him in a package for something to help us, at the NHL level, or maybe get a better prospect who could help us next year, do it. Because you're not going to use him.
It's the sell high mantra.
For sure.
This guy is having a career year, given the stats previously. Obviously this is much better, but like John said, it's a great idea to at least explore that route and explore that option, kick some tires, and see who might be interested in a guy who's having a pretty decent year in Slovakia.
Right.
Yeah. Now, if we're going to move on, we're going to move on to another goalie who's playing overseas. We have Ivan Fedotov. He's playing for Tractor Chelyabinsk in the KHL. Another good stat line. 22 games, 2.2 goals against, and a .928 save percentage. Drafted the same year as Tomic and in the 7th round out of the MHL. Yep. And I mean, what for you, Fedotov, I guess, if we're going to do like a pecking order within the Flyers organization, where do you see Fedotov?
Above Tomic, kind of in that Roddy Ross area where it's like I'm not sold on him because this year is not his normal.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at his past numbers, he hasn't put up anything like this. So I don't want to put him in an Urson or Sandstrom or Ustimenko tier. He kind of falls into that area with Roddy Ross, and he's another one where I'm like, sell high.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at it too, you almost have to discount and almost like bolster his stats a bit because he's playing on a pretty bad team.
Right.
He's 7-11-1 this season for a team that is 19-25-5 and tied for last place out of 12 teams in the East Division of the KHL. So, his draft year played well. His numbers never were eye-popping. Like, you never looked at him and thought, whoa, like, that's incredible. Right. But they were, run-of-the-mill, if not solid numbers.
Right. I mean, would you say .930 is, like, amazing? Or are you just going, like, that's pretty great?
930, I'd look at it and be like, oh, that's pretty good. Like,
right.
I'd be impressed. But I'm not going to jump out of my seat and be like, holy shnikes, this is the
right.
next Martin Brodeur,
Right. And we always get excited with the numbers. I like to view things in a track record. I like to see, is there consistency? Is there consistent development? Like, is he constantly improving? Typically if you go from a prospect who had a subpar year to an amazing year, you can typically chalk it up to a fluke more than you can say that this is the new player.
Yeah.
I would need to see this for at least another season before I go, hey, we really have something here.
And it could be attributed to defensemen even in front of him and how good
right.
they are at blocking shots and basically aiding the goalie in his play. We're not going to sit here and say we've done this immense amount of research on, Tractor Chelyabinsk here and say, well, this defenseman, da-da-da-da-da. But at the same rate, the numbers, again, at least for this year, speak for themselves. He's having a very solid year for a pretty bad team.
Right. I was fortunate to talk to somebody else who follows the Flyers prospects pretty closely. And I had mentioned to him that I was ready to count Fedotov out. He was kind of a forgotten prospect for me, and he was of that same mindset. So it's not like I was completely alone in that thought process.
Mm-hmm.
But he is someone where maybe if you can move Ustimenko and Sandstrom to the AHL next year permanently, you bring him over to put him in the ECHL to see what you have.
I like that move, and I think there's definitely going to be at least one spot open with the Reading Royals, and I think that spot should be Fedotov's. I just have a hard time, and we'll get into it later when we touch on those, because Ustimenko, Sandstrom are still considered prospects, so yes, those are two goalies we'll touch on here in a bit.
Yep.
But, argument for another time. I do see Fedotov in North America next year. He's 23 years old. He's physically mature. He's of that same cut that Sandstrom was from last year. Coming over older than Ustimenko. As we're finding out, that doesn't always spell success, though. So,
right. I mean, and while we're talking about it, I mean, to then bring him down to the ECHL after the KHL. I mean, the KHL is no joke.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's probably the second best top tier league in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows if bringing him to Reading, whether that would be a demotion and you're really not getting what you need to out of him because he's not really being challenged.
It's like when you're used to hitting 90-mile-an-hour fastballs and someone throws you a 60-mile-per-hour changeup. You look like a fool. Right. I think you don't want to insult his skill and put him in a league that's lesser than what he's accustomed to. But at the same rate, there's, earning your keep and making sure that you're paying, I shouldn't say paying your dues, but, proving yourself.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and like we've mentioned before, the Flyers own his rights forever. Yeah. So there's really no rush. They can keep him in the KHL as long as they want.
And it could be up to him. Maybe he wants to stay in the KHL, and it's kind of out of the Flyers' hands.
Yep.
Yeah. So moving on down the list here, we get to the aforementioned Roddy Ross from the Seattle Thunderbirds of the WHL. Roddy Ross, this is his first full year with the Thunderbirds. Last year, it was more of a half year. He almost single-handedly got Seattle into the playoffs last year after joining. 276 goals against and a 919 save percentage. Kind of fluttered a little bit in the playoffs. His stats were pretty, I could say putrid. They were bad. But, this was kind of one of my darlings from the draft because I took a liking to him because of just the raw athleticism. And that's a good spot. You can mold him into whatever type of goalie you think is going to be successful. So, what again, you being our prospect guy, where does Roddy Ross fall in the system right now for you?
Yeah, so I mean, if I were to put them in tiers, right, the bottom, the basement tier would be Tomic. Mm-hmm. The next tier up, I think, would be Fedotov and Roddy Ross. Maybe that's unfair for Ross, but I think he's kind of an unknown commodity right now. He was very much a low-risk, high-reward draft pick. Mm-hmm. It's a 6th-round pick. You had 2 of them. He had a good stat line for half a year. Why not? Who knows what this guy will turn into? But there still hasn't been enough, and he's not having an amazing season this year.
He's not. And, I mean, again, like we talked about with Fedotov, Seattle's 8th in the Western Conference and 4th in their division. So he's outperforming his backup, but his backup's a 17-year-old Blake Lyda, who's an .878 save percentage, .455 goals against. It's there's not a ton of competition in the crease for him.
Right.
So, but the numbers for him, again, 3.17 goals against, not ideal. Could spell, just bad defense maybe, but the 910 save percentage is okay. Decent. I'd put decent,
Right. Yeah. Again, it's nothing to complain about, but it's also nothing to gawk at.
Yeah.
I think this guy is just going to end up being he's going to be just a lost prospect in this entire cluster of goalies. I just don't think he's got enough of a track record.
He's fresh to the game. I mean,
right.
This isn't something he just seems to be coming on as of late. But, he's battling guys that have been doing this their entire lives.
Right, and you're also looking at it from a sense where if you have, let's say, aside from Carter Hart, you've got 3 legitimate, who we're going to get to, goalies who could be NHL goaltenders, like there's just not a whole lot of room for other people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so just for that point, I don't know. I feel like this one, along with Tomek, are just going to fall by the wayside.
And I mean, we've talked about other prospects off air that would end up doing this because Chuck Fletcher's not exactly acquainted with some of them. None of these are his draft classes except for Roddy Ross. Yeah. So maybe Roddy Ross is saved by that, the fact that Chuck Fletcher drafted him. But
valid point.
Again, you know, 6th round pick. You cut your losses with a 6th round pick. It's not much. You're not going to be too upset. So if we're going to move on from Roddy Ross, we get down to the 2 goalies that were brought over to North America at the beginning of this season. We have Kirill Ustimenko. We'll start with him. Ustimenko is probably my favorite prospect in the crease for the Flyers. I was very high on him because of the consistency, like you mentioned, with the stats and how his numbers stayed consistently good, very good. I mean, you're talking 927, 929 save percentages. There's a 930 somewhere in there, I believe. 1.78 goals against, 1.81. You know, he was consistently good in the equivalent of juniors in Russia. And he's actually proving he's starting to kind of catch on in Reading. It's a different style over here. Being a goalie is very different from being a goalie here in North America. It's very different from being a goalie over there in Russia.
Completely different ice structure. Yeah. I mean, the dimensions of the rink are all different.
I don't know whether you're being sarcastic or not. Like, it's a hexagon over there.
well, I guess
I'm kidding.
No, but it's a bigger sheet of ice, isn't it?
It's it is. It's okay. 200 feet, I think.
Right. So I was
being
serious. I don't know where you're getting the sarcastic thing from. I'm serious all the time.
Yeah, Mr. Serious over there. But yeah, for you talked about tiers. Which tier do you find Ustimenko on here?
So this is where it gets interesting. Because I think there is one that's above. If we have a group of 3, right? Whatever, I'll say their names. Ustimenko, Sandstrom, and Ursum. I think there's one that's above the other 2. He's not that one for me. I think that he fits like just below them. I do think he has a legitimate chance of being a good goaltender. I didn't say great. Good goaltender in the NHL. I still think he's a long ways away. I think that he'll play at least a full season in Lehigh Valley before he even gets a sniff with the Flyers, unless, injury things continue to happen. But, I mean, there definitely is potential there. There's something to be excited about. I mean, like you said, the consistency's there. Also, he was a 3rd-round pick. So, he was viewed as a legitimate goalie prospect when he was drafted. And the beautiful thing about him is you don't have to rush him. He's only 20. You have so many other options that you could always put ahead of him. Like, say, they're like, hey, you know what? You'll be better off one more year in Reading. I don't agree with that, but just say that they are. They could bring Fedotov over, and he could play in Lehigh Valley and allow Ustimenko that time to continue to mature.
Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, and I mean, he's actually performing pretty well for Reading right now. In 24 games, he's 13-4-4.
They're not a great team either.
Exactly. Most of the losses, I hate to say it, come at the hand of Felix Sandstrom right now. Sandstrom's got 2 shutouts to 1 for Ustimenko, but this is one of those things. At the beginning of the year, there was talks about one of these guys being the backup to Alex Lyon in Lehigh Valley, and I stood by what I said, and I said this Ustimenko should be the backup.
Right.
And I mean, there are a lot of people that were like, nope, Sandstrom, he's older, he's more mature, and that's fine. Sound logic. But at the same rate, I had a hunch, and I'm not going to sit here and, be like, I'm Nostradamus, I predict the future.
Right.
Because this is a lucky guess on my part. But from what I'd gathered about Ustamenko's play in Russia, I really thought he was going to be the guy, regardless of how old he was, to back up Lyon. And it turns out we were all wrong because it's Berube.
Right.
But still, I'm glad that Ustamenko is playing better than Sandstrom, but I'm also not happy that Sandstrom's not playing well.
Right. I mean, I was one of those people that thought that Sandstrom should actually get a very large amount of starts in Lehigh Valley. I mean, he's no spring chicken. He's 23. I mean, he's not old, but in hockey terms, I don't know. What are hockey years?
I mean, 23
dog years are every 7 years. You say 23 is about 35 in real life.
35, you said? Jeez. I mean, 20, like you said, 23, you're not this up-and-coming budding prospect, but you're also not a grizzled vet,
Right. Yeah, I mean, especially in goalie land. I mean, they take longer to develop.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, if you could ask for the best situation for Sandstrom for this season, as far as his performance, it's the exact opposite of what's been happening.
Yeah, him getting the majority of the starts.
Well, I mean, in the ECHL, he sucked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not very professional for me to say, but a .877 save percentage.
Yeah,
in the lowest of the low professional leagues in North America, that's not good at all.
Oh, and it shattered, I shouldn't say shattered, but it definitely isn't meeting expectations for what we thought he would be when he came here to North America, because so many of us had high expectations, wanting him to be, a potential down-the-road backup for a guy like Carter Hart, or even,
right.
The starter for Lehigh Valley for an elongated period of time. Whatever your standard is that you set, that's yours, but it's just, right now it's not working out. And can it be fixed? Absolutely. I think,
of course,
like you said, getting him some starts, getting him some playing time. I think maybe even just forcing playing time on him in the AHL right now with Lyon up for the next couple weeks. Why not?
Right.
I hate to say it, Lehigh Valley's not playing well either. So,
right. Well, and my stance.
Exactly.
If he's up there, he should be getting most of the starts. I don't care if he's letting in 8 goals a night.
Yeah. Let him learn. They've got to learn somehow. And I guess now we've already segued into Felix Sandstrom. But
right.
We've talked about consistency again and again and again. And what you see with Sandstrom here is consistency, but not the consistency and not to the degree you saw with Ustamenko, where Ustamenko's 930, 927, save percent, 929, I apologize.
Right.
He's putting up 904, 908, 905, 911. That's 4 years right there. And that's in 25 games, 22, 8, and 19. Ustamenko played 53 games the one year and then 46 the next. That's even more impressive. And I'm done tooting his horn.
Right.
But, he was also drafted in the third round of the 2015 draft with Tomek. And
it's tricky, though. If we could just take a moment, because we're talking about different leagues and different levels and different countries. That's the crazy thing about prospects. You're not just looking at one league. You're not just looking at the AHL, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking all over the place. And it's crazy because none of us are going to be experts about all these leagues and be able to say, oh, well, that's equivalent to this and that, but it's so hard for us to say, oh, well, those numbers in the SHL are poor, because if you compare them to the rest of the SHL goaltenders, maybe they're not.
You're right. And it's all about where the other guys stand, because the best goalie that year could have had a 2.50 and a 9.10 save percentage, whereas Sandstrom's numbers aren't that far off from that.
Right. One of the things that I've always felt with Sandstrom was he would be the first Carter Hart backup. I thought that he would get to the NHL the quickest, but when Urson and Ustimenko fully developed, he would be traded.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if he rounds his game out to where we initially thought it would go, he could be a very valuable trade chip, at the very least. You know, not something that, obviously, if there is potential for him to be the backup to Carter Hart, I'd rather that than trade him, but obviously it depends on the return as well. You know, I think, again, we've hammered this point home pretty well here. Getting Sandstrom some starts should be top priority, and getting him used to the game instead of these sporadic starts between, you know, he's got 15 games played, whereas you look at Ustimenko and he's got 24.
Right.
So aside from these spot starts or, you know, even just on the tail end of a back-to-back, get Sandstrom some consistent starts. You know, maybe the second half of the ECHL season, make him the go-to guy and see what he does and how he runs with it.
Right.
Yeah. Now there's really only one more person to discuss when it comes to goalies within the Flyers prospect system, and that is your top guy, which is, from what it sounds like, Samuel Urson. And Samuel Urson was drafted in the 5th round of the 2018 draft, Ron Hextall's last draft for the Flyers. Urson's having a bit of a rough go this season right now.
First full season in the SHL.
Yes.
The Swedish Pro League. Yeah, I mean, numbers aren't great. I mean, I know you're probably about to say this, but .897 save percentage, 2.58 goals against in 19 games. Not great, but it's also his first year. And what I love about that is we could chalk it up to his first year.
Exactly.
Because look at his numbers the year before in the Allsvenskan, which is a league below the SHL, and they're phenomenal.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
1.95 goals against, .933 save percentage. Then you go a step back and look at his numbers in the Super Elite, which is, again, lower level.
Yep.
And he's got a... Oh, go ahead. You say it.
Yeah, he's got a 2.53 and 9.20. That was during his draft year, and that was in 40 games. Right.
I mean, in 2018-19, the World Juniors, 4 games, not a huge sample size, but .922 save percentage. You know, I really like this guy because, again, I like the consistency of the numbers, and you can kind of see the progression in his development. Like, there should be a hiccup in your first pro year. And like, it's happening, but you can look back at his other numbers and go, "Hey, that's okay." Like, look what he's done to this point. You know, this is the top level over there. Here should be a hiccup.
Yeah, it's an adjustment. You know, it's always an adjustment, and the way he responds, I think next year will be more telling as to what type of player we have in him.
Right, and that's why he can't come over to North America next year. I think he needs another year to see what he can do there, like a redemption tour, if you will.
You're right. So, with all this being said, if there's nothing more to add with Samuel Urson here, unless you'd like to keep touching on him, it's up to you.
No. I mean, to me, he's the top prospect goalie. I think he's the one with the most likely chance of being like a starting caliber at the NHL.
Agreed. I absolutely agree with you there. Now, given the situation that the Flyers have right now, we have 2 expiring contracts with the Phantoms between J.F. Berube and Alex Lyon. You have Carter Hart and you have Brian Elliott. Brian Elliott's contract expires at the end of the year as well.
Yep.
Down with the Reading Royals, you have Sandstrom and Ustimenko.
Yep.
What happens next year? Who comes over? Who stays? And what do these 3 teams' goalie situations look like? I mean, we could argue we know what the Flyers situation is going to look like.
Right. Yeah, well, okay, if I could start there, you'll have Carter Hart, and I think that you can't have one of these young guys be your backup next year. I don't think any of them have proven that. I think you need to go and get another veteran. We're not going to spend too much time because this is Pod Street Prospects, but that's what that should be in the NHL.
Absolutely.
In a perfect world, in my mind, next year in Lehigh Valley, it's Sandstrom and Ustimenko.
Okay.
They've both done the Reading thing. Slide them up. I would imagine there's some sort of chemistry between the two of them. It would be nice for them to be a tandem together. Allow them to see what they can do in Lehigh Valley. Then to me, you bring over Fedotov and you do what you did with Ustimenko and Sandstrom and put him in Reading.
Okay.
Then the great thing is, if Sandstrom or Ustimenko prove that they're not ready for Lehigh Valley, you flop them with Fedotov.
Okay.
You know, I mean, and then I always get really confused about this, and I don't know if you did any research, but Roddy Ross, okay, he's going to turn 20 in July.
Okay.
Now, I believe, and if anybody listening to this wants to correct me, please do so. I believe that if he's not signed by the Flyers, he can spend one more year in the WHL if he's not signed. But I believe that if he's signed, because he'll be 20 in July, I think he would then have to come over to either Reading or Lehigh Valley.
I think you're right. I think that because it's before the season that he turns 20, he might have to come over.
Right, there's an age cutoff, and I think it's November. If you turn 20 in November, it's like Wyatt Wiley.
Yes.
If he was signed, he would have been in Lehigh Valley.
Yep.
But he wasn't signed.
Yeah. So he stayed with with Everett.
Right, but he turned 20 in November. Right?
Yeah.
So this would be, I mean, he would be 20 for the WHL season. So yeah, no, then that's fine. He should be able to play one more year in the WHL. I think I've just solved my own problem.
Okay, perfect. Well,
so you wouldn't sign him?
No, probably not. I think, like you said, there's too many other goalies that are kind of ahead of him in the pecking order. You know, when you look at Lehigh Valley, we're going to talk about wanting to get these players reps. We're going to want to talk about making sure that these guys are getting the load that you would want them to get. Right. And I guess we should start in Reading for that matter, because that's, you know, the lowest here. I've got Sandstrom staying down there because I think Sandstrom needs a full year as the guy. So whether you want to run with him in Lehigh Valley, and it all depends on training camp, obviously. Right. But I think, you know, if Sandstrom can't perform up to what everybody wants him to, or at least surpass Ustimenko, I think it might be more beneficial to keep him in Reading and get him those starter reps.
I have a question for you then.
Okay.
Should Ustimenko have been the one called up to Lehigh Valley?
No.
Okay.
Because I like him getting the reps with Reading. I think they might, to me at least, and I could absolutely be wrong here, they might just be chalking this season up for Sandstrom as kind of an adjustment period. Whereas Ustimenko seems to have found his footing a bit more quickly than Sandstrom. Maybe they're like, okay, you know, Ustimenko found it quicker. We'll kind of put him on the fast track. Maybe not fast track, but we're going to, you know, keep him on the track. Sandstrom, we're going to, you know, kind of hit the little bit of a reset button, and we're going to let him take the reins in Reading next year. Fedotov, if Fedotov's going to back him up, you know, it might be more of a 1A, 1B thing if Fedotov comes over. That's okay.
But and I hate to cut you off, but I think that this brings up a good conversation. And I know we want to wrap this up soon, but I think it brings up a good conversation because you're talking about two of your older goalie prospects, right?
You're right. Yeah, and Sandstrom's 23, he'll be 24 next year, and then you've got Fedotov who's the same age. Right.
So to me, right, I feel like one of those guys will have to be in Lehigh Valley. I just wonder at that age, sticking both of them in the ECHL.
See, and here's where you're probably going to disagree with me.
Okay.
In Lehigh Valley, I've got Ustimenko, but I have them keeping Lyon one more year. I know you don't like that. I know. But you also need to understand that Alex Lyon's a big fan favorite there, and he's good. He's a good AHL goalie. So having Ustamenko kind of play behind him, maybe be the 1B, not a bad idea. And then maybe if they decide to go this route, having a third goalie as like a veteran that can float between NHL, AHL, or what, in case Ustamenko's not ready to take the reins, Hart gets hurt again, who knows?
Right. Well, and what you're saying is much more of what we've noticed from Chuck Fletcher's approach. Like, he likes kind of having those veteran guys in Lehigh Valley. If you see what he did with the blue line. So what you're saying is a very realistic possibility. I just think if you're going to bring over Fedotov, right, you've got to move the guys that you brought over last year. It's got to be like a motion. I don't know. I think that it would just be like competitive.
The biggest reason I think they're going to keep Lyon is because Lyon is from Baudette, Minnesota. Do you know who else is from Minnesota?
I do.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Too bad his name is not Lalix Lyon, because he would definitely be here. He loves those alliterations.
Oh, yeah. If it started with an L. But, yeah, I mean, and who knows? Obviously, this is way too early to project what these crease situations are going to look like. It's always fun, though.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Especially with prospects. But for now, folks, that has been your second dose of the Pod Street Prospects. John, tell everybody where they can find us.
You can find us at Pod ST Bullies on Twitter. You can also find us at Pod ST Prospects. The weekend is coming, so you'll see a lot more stuff going on that. It's not a page, is it?
It's more of like a Twitter account.
Well, no crap, it's a Twitter account. I didn't know if you call the thing a page. Whatever.
Like a timeline.
Sure.
Whatever.
We can find it on there. It'll do things.
Yeah.
This weekend. Things will happen on that page.
Exactly.
Account.
And we've been trying to keep up with some of the games, keeping up with some of the prospect news as well, where I would be live tweeting the game right now, but we're doing this. This is more important to us. This is more fun, too, because the Flyers are down 3-1 right now. But anyways, you can find both of us on Twitter, PodStreetGove, PodStreetBob. But for now, folks, this has been the Pod Street Prospects. I know we argued about this last week, but, let's go Flyers. Gonna stick with that?
Bye now. Yeah.
Okay. Sweet.